What if there was another way to actually live, a way that you can actually start to be in charge of your own healing, a way to get out of this survival mode and into creative mode? Well, it's my job as your host of the Healing Tree Hub to introduce you to some modalities that might actually make all the difference and to give you your power back. My name is Sarah, and I have the pleasure of meeting you every week to discuss new modalities and new topics that are really making a difference out there. So buckle up and enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome to the first ever Healing Tree Hub podcast. I am so excited to actually start this podcast. It's been something I've been simmering up for quite some time. My name is Sarah. I live in Wallen, Australia, and I'm an intuitive energy healer and founder of Wallen Healing Tree. I've decided to start this podcast to actually have some amazing conversations about some of the lessons and learnings and the process of my spiritual awakening and so many others around me. I know that this podcast can help so many people on their spiritual journey. So I'm really hoping that you've been attracted to this particular podcast because it's exactly what you need. And whatever information comes through is exactly what you're supposed to hear right now. So this session here is just a little introduction to what we're going to be doing in the future with the podcast. I'm really looking forward to actually sharing and being vulnerable with you all and letting you know about my experience and how I actually awoken spiritually. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always an open energy healer. It was something that I did keep close to my heart for many, many years, that I was, seeing energy, experiencing energy, sensing energy, or clairsentient. But now that I've completely embraced it and literally left my career for it, which I'll discuss in a bit more detail later, it has just been the most incredible, wild ride, and I wouldn't take it back for a second. So I just want to start with a little bit of information and background about who I am and where I've come from. Just spend the rest of this little podcast talking about my journey. From the earliest age, I could see energy. I didn't actually know what was going on at the time, and it was a bit of trial and error trying to figure out what exactly I was seeing. At one stage, they thought it was just my vision or my migraines, etc. But I was actually seeing energy around people's body, so the aura. So it was really quite confusing at the time. At the same time, I was quite a little medium as a child. I would see a lot of spirits, just like I would see you or me standing right there, and this could be really confronting. And my mum was an absolute angel. She was fantastic trying to guide me through this, but she had absolutely no idea what was going on. The most useful information we had was that my grandfather was quite sensitive and had a knowing, a clear cognitive ability where he just knew if people were passing away, etc. But other than that, no one around us was really spiritual in the sense of seeing, feeling, sensing energy. So this was quite new. So I spent a lot of my years trying to figure out why spirits were presenting themselves to me in the middle of the night. And some of these energies, they were pretty dense. And we'll be talking a lot about that in some of these podcasts in regards to frequencies and vibrations and what the difference is and the law of attraction. So I'm really excited about the next podcast to dive into that a bit more. But what I can tell you is that when your energy frequency is low and dense, that is what you will attract. And if you're a little mystic or someone that is a beaming light to the spiritual realm, then, that can be attracted. So it's really wonderful to have resources like this podcast and many other incredible speakers to just help guide people that are learning, because it's so easy to protect yourself, and it is nothing to be afraid of. And my main aim out there in my job and also on this podcast is to eliminate fear from people's world. If I knew that fear wasn't necessary, I think my childhood spiritual experience would have been a lot easier. I do have a story that I just absolutely love though, and I would love to share it with you in this particular podcast. It was one of my first little ghost stories I could share with you. And I promise that all my ghost stories are very positive and always have a good outcome. It's nothing's going to scare you or freak you out in this one. But yeah, I was, as I said before, quite a little medium. And I used to love spending time at my auntie Denise's house, and I might even one day get her on this podcast to share a bit of information on this story because it was quite wild. I used to go upstairs, and there was this beautiful little playroom, and I would spend quite some time up there chattering, talking to myself. I was an only child, and I loved playing up there on my own. And apparently I had a little imaginary friend called Matthew. Me and Matthew got along like a house on fire. I still remember him like it was yesterday, clear as a day. To me, he was just a normal person, not a spirit. Everyone took this pretty casually, not too seriously, just imaginary friend. Plenty of kids have them. Until one night when my auntie's friend came to stay the night after a big night of drinking, and in the middle of the night she was woken up by a beautiful little boy with the same description as Matthew. She ran downstairs, told my auntie about it. My auntie almost fell off her chair when she heard the description of the boy, because it really brought it into light that this imaginary friend wasn't imaginary. And back in the 80s, that was kind of a big thing. If Denise ever comes onto this podcast, she will tell you that so many things would go missing in her house. There was a wild story about some really important earrings that went missing, and this cheeky spirit Matthew would really love to play tricks and hide really important items. And this went on for years and years and years. And eventually my auntie Denise decided to move, and they were outside, I believe, putting boxes into the truck, and they were speaking to the neighbours, and the neighbour said, "I'm so sad that you're leaving as well. We had great neighbours before you, and now you're leaving." And Denise took this opportunity to ask, why did the last neighbours leave? And they explained that this devastating situation had happened where their little boy had passed away on the property. So that was an incredible turning point for my family. And all of a sudden people realized, okay, Sarah really is seeing things. So yeah, that was a real turning point. And even my dad came on board at that stage. I remember my dad coming in with his shotgun and he literally pretended to, with blanks, of course, pretended to shoot the spirits that I was clearly pointing at and seeing very, very clearly. He couldn't see it. Just that extra little bit of support that I had from my friends and family made a huge, big difference, because not being believed as a child was the toughest process to try and navigate. But once you knew that people understood you and believed you, then that made it all a bit easier. I was also visited quite often by what I can only describe as a little extraterrestrial, and this being would actually come, and this energy would be so incredibly strong, and I would just have complete sleep paralysis when this happened, and terror would of course come through me because I was quite young when this being appeared, and the only identifying sound I had, or warning I had, was a sound that sounded like ip, 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 ip. So of course I called him Ip Ip. I would then be transported just completely in an instant moment into the corridor, where he would stand in the same place every time, 4 foot tall, leathery brown skin, large eyes, bowed legs, long arms, and he wouldn't communicate. There would be no communication, but I was just too afraid to hear anything, if any messages were coming through. And then just as quickly as it started, I'd be transported back into bed. And this would happen night after night after night after night until I was at least 17 years old, and I ended up having some hypnosis to help me to disconnect from this being, and I haven't seen him since. I now realize that that creature was actually not there to harm me. I think that they were actually trying to communicate, and that's a really fun thought because I'm really excited about the extraterrestrial possibilities now, and I think that's a really cool and exciting thing. which we'll talk a lot more about in the future of this podcast too, hopefully. So years went on and my aura reading became stronger and stronger. But there came a time, and one particular scenario, one particular story I'd like to share before we finish up was I remember going to an ex-boyfriend's a stepmother's house, and I remember seeing all of these muddy blotches on the aura and just this instant feeling which I'd never had before of illness and dread. And I had to go outside at the time, and my boyfriend at the time came and spoke to me and said, "What's going on?" And I explained, I can see such illness and sickness in her aura. I feel it. I can see it. I just had to get out of there. His face had dropped when I had said that, because he then explained that this woman was full of cancer and there was no way for me to know that. It was that moment right there and then, that I shut my gifts off. And I shut them off for many, many years. Just the fear of not knowing what to do with this ability, it was really scary. But the wonderful thing is I throughout my experiences and throughout my life, I experienced a nice big chunk of life of really getting into my parenting without any of that distraction, because I can't imagine trying to do that stage while I was as distracted as I am now. And now that my children are a little bit older and a little bit more independent, I'm really allowing myself to just dive fully and deeply into this experience. And it has been incredible. So I decided to do a Reiki course, or an energy healing course. I've done quite a few different energies in October last year. And the attunements were so incredibly powerful. I will never, ever forget the trance meditations that I were in. It was like my guides and angels were just waiting for this to happen. It was incredible. And since then, I have not stopped healing. I have a little business that I have started, and it has just been incredible how fast the business has grown to energy healings. And now I'm doing workshops, and I'm doing wellness retreats and festivals, and I'm having so much fun just being guided continuously by my guides, going deep into meditation, listening to the messages, going with the flow, making sure that my vibration is the most important thing, because that's what's going to benefit my children and my family and everyone around me. So that's what this podcast is all about. It's about helping others to really enjoy their life, to get realigned, to learn so much about their frequency and vibration and how important it actually is, to help people understand that you're your own healer. And I'm going to give so many tips and tricks out throughout these sessions. I can't wait. So thank you. Thank you so much for listening to my first ever podcast. I'm going to keep it really short for this one. And I'm really looking forward to the next one. Thanks very much. Bye.